Okay, good evening. So, I want to make a quick video about the upcoming presidential inauguration for President-elect Biden. And I want to highlight two things. First of all, in the last video I made two errors. One, the city of Pensacola, the seal does not have a Spanish flag. It actually has a conquistador's helmet. I apologize for that. And then the other thing is that the Treaty of Ghent ended the War of 1812. And the Treaty of Paris, of course, ended the American Revolution in 1783. So I apologize for that. I know a lot of stuff, I guess. I have a lot of useless information in my head. And sometimes when I do these things, I just do them by memory. So in my haste to get something done, my zeal to get the message out there, I guess I kind of made some errors. So I did correct those in the notes, but just I want to make sure that it's factual. I owe you that. So, and if you find me that I make a mistake, please call me on it. I'm more than amenable to that. I'm open to that as well. So I want to talk very quickly about the presidential inauguration coming up. And what I want everybody to highlight, what I want to highlight for everybody is we are a resilient people. We are a robust people, and we have a very resilient constitution. I wish more people would actually read it and understand it. I mean, many of us, if you're an attorney, if you're a public official, if you're in the military, many other things, we take an oath to preserve, protect, and defend, or uphold the Constitution of the United States. And I have to wonder, how many times do we actually read it? I mean, I've read it a few times. I mean, it's kind of something I just do. But I really wonder, do we ever read it? Do we ever study it? And so I want to specifically talk and focus in on the presidency of the United States. And I got some numbers here. I'm going to read them to you, and I'll give you the sources as well. And so pardon me while I take my eyes off the camera here for a second. The 1790 census was the first census commissioned by the United States. I believe it was commissioned in August. That's when August of 1790 was when they actually began to walk out and do the collection. Came back and said there were about 3.9 million Americans. And today we have, it's estimated, about 331 million Americans. The average life expectancy of a white male, because white males were the ones who were, they were mostly counted. I mean, they were black people were counted, but also about, I think, 90% of about 700,000 black people in the United States at the time. About 90% of them, unfortunately, were slaves, and of course, they counted for 3/5. And that was, of course, written into the Constitution. And then later on, of course, that was changed by a series of amendments like the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments after the Civil War, which I really wish more Americans would study those three amendments. And we hear a lot about them if you take constitutional law, but I really think a lot of Americans just kind of glaze over that, and they glaze over the legislation that was passed in the later 1860s as well to assist and support and try to remedy some of the things that happened to minorities in this country after the Civil War. So the average life expectancy of a white male was 38 years old. Okay, George Washington, when he was sworn in as President of the United States, was about 57 years old. I think he was born, 1832? I mean, not 1732, was it? Or 1732, I think it was. And he was sworn in, I believe, in 1789. So he was 57. So he was already well above the life expectancy of an American male at that time. Now, fast forward that to today. And I want you to understand that, we have had rough elections. We have had rough presidential transitions. The difference is how people understood and perceived the presidency. The difference is technology. The difference is the fact that the federal government's role in people's lives was kind of small. I mean, yeah, we had an army. After the Civil War, we didn't really have a Navy. The Navy went into decline, and the Army, of course, was out fighting in the West. And, there was not really a big standing army, not until World War I, and then there was a drawdown, World War II, of course a drawdown after that, but of course we maintained a large military during the Cold War. And the significance of the presidency changed then as well. And also it changed during the Great Depression, it changed during other times. But I think what we really miss in America when we think about the presidency is we tend to not understand the fact that how we understand the presidency is really a product of everything about 1901 forward. 1901 to about the Wilson administration, which ended in 21, and then of course the administration of Franklin Roosevelt from 33 to 45, and then subsequent to that the Cold War presidencies. We don't understand that the presidency has not always been this center of action. It has not always been the bully pulpit, as Theodore Roosevelt called it. It wasn't always this point of dynamic government and social action. It wasn't this moral the center of moral leadership that we look for today. And so in the period from, say, 1865, after the assassination of President Lincoln, I think that was in April of 1865, of course, Andrew Johnson becomes president. Johnson was the first president to be impeached, and he survived removal from office. I think there were 3 charges, and he survived removal by 1 vote in the Senate. 1 vote short of the 2/3 required to convict him and remove him from office. I think then Senator Kennedy, back in the 1950s, wrote a great book, and I read it many years ago, called Profiles in Courage, and I believe he actually speaks about the senator who voted against impeachment, against the conviction of President Johnson. So you have Johnson, then you have Ulysses S. Grant become president. There was remarkable corruption. The Grant administration was riddled with corruption and incompetence. But there's some other administrations that kind of are there, but most Americans, we don't really know much about them. They're kind of these, the absent president, I guess you'd call it. So I just want to read some numbers to you really quick. Rutherford Hayes versus Samuel Tilden. Okay, I think this is the, yes. This is about 1876, 1877, 1876 election, 1877. There were disputes, votes for in Louisiana, South Carolina, and Florida. And if those numbers had been, if all of the states, if the numbers fell out appropriately, you would have a split of 185 to 184 electoral votes. Remember, all you need is a majority. So it'd be 185 to 184. And so Congress appointed a commission, 8 Republicans, 7 Democrats. And of course, they came back 8-7 to award those 3 contests to Mr. Hayes, the Republican. And of course, he received more electoral votes. He received 185 electoral votes to Samuel Tilden's 184 electoral votes. Now, where I got these numbers is actually from the White House website. You can go on the White House website, and if you look at past presidents, you can read these neat little bios of each president. So it's pretty instructive to read about the presidents from 1865 until about 1900, 1901. So Benjamin Harrison versus Grover Cleveland. Okay, Cleveland actually won the popular vote, but Harrison won the electoral vote, 233 to 168. We've had tough presidential contests before. We've had presidents come into office who failed to win the popular vote. We've had elections of questionable integrity. We've had Congress do things that were really unusual, not what we're used to. But our Constitution has procedures in it to ensure the survival, may not always be perfect, but to ensure some degree of stability and survival for our republic. And I want you to keep in mind, we are a republic, okay? We elect people to go represent and govern us. They are subject to our decisions. They are subject to our will through the ballot. But we're not a democracy, okay? The Founding Fathers were very reluctant to give too much control to popular will and popular passion. Now, but keep in mind, they also had this idea that, hey, you know what, if we're going to elect people to public office, people live to be about 38 years old. And I mean, some people, if they live to be 60, maybe they'll make it to 75. The numbers were good there. But people didn't stay in office for 30, 40 years. I mean, I think I'm a huge believer in term limits. I think we should all have, I think everybody should have term limits. We all have a shelf life. And so think about this. You have Cleveland. He was the first and only president to do 2 non-consecutive terms. We've had presidents who won the popular vote, but yet lost the electoral vote, electoral college vote. In 1881, the president was James Garfield. And what happened to him? He was assassinated by someone who didn't get a position in the government. And so we had civil service reform after that. Once again, we've had scandals. We've had people who were just not really good human beings become president. And about 1900, you see, before that, we had William McKinley become president. And McKinley, of course, the Spanish-American War, 1898, 99 timeframe. And what happened to him, I believe, he was reelected in 1900. In 1901, he was assassinated. And so one of the youngest people to ever be president, I think the youngest man to ever be president was Theodore Roosevelt. He was 42 years old. And so how we understand the modern presidency comes from, I think, there. I think we look back at that, and this is when we begin this pattern of saying, hey, we want a young, dynamic president. We want somebody who's going to take action, who's going to, a bully pulpit, somebody who's going to be a crusader, somebody, the center of action, somebody who's active in foreign affairs. And of course, the United States at that time, we'd grown tremendously after the Civil War. Industrial, we became the most powerful economy in the world. We became the most powerful country in the world. We were very reluctant to use that. And of course, until the Spanish-American War, and then of course in World War I. And so it's instructive to study history and to study that time period, because I think that's where we're going again. I think we're beginning to realize the presidency, we're asking things of the president that he or she is ill-equipped to provide, absent a national crisis. Now, I want to talk a little bit about President Trump, and he's going to be leaving the White House in a few days. Wednesday, so today's Sunday. Things change. President Truman, one of my heroes. I'm a big fan of President Harry S. Truman. He often said, I can't quote him directly, but something to the effect of, I don't really care what people think about me now. History will determine that, and history's not written until I've been dead for many years. And think about it. Think about how we view presidents in retrospect. So, give you an example. When President Truman left office, this is according to Gallup, okay, some historical research by the Gallup people. President Truman's approval rating when he left office in 1953 was 45.4%. And we were mired in Korea. People were angry. And I think there were some economic problems. There was a bit of a recession going on. And people were disappointed with President Truman overall. Remember, President Truman was not supposed to win re-election against Governor Dewey. And yet he did. He eked it out. When President Eisenhower left office, he left with 65% approval. When President Kennedy, he didn't leave office. He was assassinated, of course, in 1963. But at the end of his presidency, he had a 70.1% approval rating. Now, interesting thing about President Kennedy is this. President Kennedy won the presidency in November of 1960 by a popular vote of 112,827 votes. 49.72% of the popular vote against then Vice President Richard Nixon. He won the electoral vote by 303 to 219. Many people, Seymour Hersh has written about it, The Dark Side of Camelot. Many people have written about some of the electoral misdeeds of the Kennedy machine, of the Democrats in Chicago and places like that. Now, I want you to think about something, though. I think at that time, Vice President Nixon could have made a stink about it. But as I understand it, for the good of the country, and also for his own political advantage, to ensure his political future, then Vice President Nixon decided, let's go ahead and concede. This is bad for the country. Here we are, we're engaged in this Cold War, we're engaged against the Soviet Union. Our country needs to be united and strong, and politics, there's no justice in politics. I wish people would understand that. Life is not fair. And Vice President Nixon conceded. And he could have come back and said, hey, what the Daily people did in Chicago was wrong, and I'm going to make a fuss about it. And that would have dragged out the result, would have dragged out who's going to be our president. But President Kennedy won with about 49.72% of the vote. When he was assassinated, okay, there's some, The Dark Side of Camelot's an interesting book to read about President Kennedy. Another great book is 1,000 Days by, I hope I don't mess up his name, Arthur Schlesinger Jr., who was an advisor to President Kennedy. I read that book when I was a child, actually. It's pretty thick, but it's pretty good to read. I was a big JFK fan when I was a kid. And so he wins with about 49.72% of the vote. Polling after his assassination, 59% of Americans said they voted for him. Now think about that. More American, maybe I'm wrong there, but I think it was about 59%. But more people said that they voted for him than actually voted for him. So I had to go back and check those numbers, but I seem to recall, and I'm saying this off memory, I can't remember specific numbers, but the number of people who said they voted for him exceeded the number who actually voted for him. People claim, hell yeah, I voted for JFK. Well, JFK, sad to say, his assassination was the thing that most defined his presidency. Lyndon Johnson, when he left office, 55.1% approval rating, and yet we were mired in Vietnam. Richard Nixon resigned from presidency in August 1974, 49% approval rating. President Ford, under the 25th Amendment, became president and everything, actually became vice president under that amendment too, I believe, because Spiro Agnew had to resign. 47.2%. He pardoned President Nixon. And of course took a great deal of heat for that, but he said it was the right thing for the country to go ahead and put Watergate behind us and move on. I don't want a president of the United States in prison. He wanted to heal this country. President Carter, 45%. Reagan, very high, of course. But some other numbers, George Herbert Walker Bush, 60.9% approval rating when he left office. Now, why do I say all this? I say this because I don't want to close the book on the Trump presidency yet. And I don't think that it's good for us to walk around and be angry about this election. This is one of, hopefully dozens of elections this country will have in the next 100 years. This is hopefully, we're a more resilient republic than how we see the election today. The media are not going to teach you or talk to you about things in a historical context. They don't care about truth. They don't care about reconciliation. They don't care about the health of the United States and just, keeping your blood pressure reasonable. They want to show you content that will anger you and cause you to reflexively click and read it. And it's going to reinforce your ideas and opinions. Okay, it's called niche media. Juan Williams spoke about this one time when he came to speak at the Tiger Bay Club. Objective truth, giving you balance. No one has that doesn't sell. Okay, people don't want to see that. They want things that are going to reinforce their prejudices, reinforce their biases, reinforce what they already think about the other side. And the more inflammatory, the better. And because of algorithms and everything, we can figure out which way you're going, and we can begin to feed content to you accordingly to keep you on. I mean, how many people do you know who watch? I mean, Fox News, okay? I read Fox News on occasion, pretty much every day. I know people that's on there in their house all the time, and I work in government facilities, and Fox News is on. And then some places you go and it's MSNBC, it's always on. You're getting this constant stream. But there's no historical context there. President Truman left. A pretty unpopular president. But in retrospect, he's considered one of the best presidents we ever had. Think about the decisions President Truman had to make. The use of nuclear weapons against Japan to end World War II. The Marshall Plan. NATO. Integration in the U.S. military. The recovery of the United States after World War II. And I'm not saying so much, the United States was doing really well economically after World War II. But we had to transition an economy from a military economy, an economy set up and designed to fight a war, and we had demobilized 16 million Americans. And we had to transition that into a peacetime economy. The GI Bill that really helped build the modern middle class. In many ways, President Truman was a great president. President Eisenhower, all he did was play golf. Well, President Eisenhower also, we know things about what he did in the Cold War. He warned us of the military-industrial complex. Great speeches. If you ever want to read wonderful speeches about the dangers of a too strong military and a technical elite seizing control of this country, or controlling too much, having too much control of our government, read President Eisenhower's farewell address. Lyndon Johnson, yes, Vietnam, but he still had a pretty high approval rating. Great Society, civil rights. President Nixon, Watergate, terrible thing, absolutely. But yet, arms limitations with the Soviets, rapprochement with China, the end of the Vietnam War. And President Ford, in many ways, took courageous steps to heal this country after Watergate. So my point to you is this, ladies and gentlemen. Don't get caught up in the here and now. Keep in mind, the voices we're hearing now are voices that are angry, are voices that are self-interested, are voices that are doing this to ensure their political advantage. Step back. Take a deep breath. Look at the historical record. Look at what happened with elections and the presidency from 1865 to 1900. Look at the kind of government we established in the later 1700s. Okay? we've been blessed that we've had really great leaders at critical times in our country. But also understand the picture is bigger than what we're seeing now. So I could talk for a long time about this, but I want to keep it to 20 minutes. I appreciate your attention. Please send me your thoughts, your comments, your criticisms. I'll make more of these if you choose, if people like them. But on Wednesday, some people are going to be angry, some people are going to be happy. I look at it like this: the American system survives and it works, but as President, I think it was Jefferson said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. And so we need to maintain vigilance, and we also need to keep a historical perspective, and understand that we've been through this before. We're going to get out of it. We're going to be okay. Sometimes, though, I guess we're at that point now where we just need to control the ambitious and those who have way too much ambition and maybe a little too short-sighted, and ensure that we check their influence on our government and our lives. Thank you so much. Have a great day. God bless you.